Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Okay, and I'd like to welcome everyone to our new series, which is COVID-19 Across the Globe, National Solidarity Series. It's presented by the GACC, so the German American Chamber of Commerce, Colorado, as well as WorldDenver. This series is going to be about connecting people across the globe in the time of COVID-19, learning from each other about what's going on in the world outside of our own respective countries. Today we have a few different panelists, but before I get to that, I'd like to introduce John Krieger from WorldDenver, who we are partnering with in this endeavor.
Great. Thank you, William, and thank you to the German American Chamber. I also want to thank folks who took time out of their day to be a part of this call this morning, and I think we all apologize. We're in a new world now, trying to learn how to provide this content in a kind of virtual way, and I'm glad that we're able to at least still kind of get these perspectives and get them out to folks. I definitely want to thank our panelists who are with us this morning and giving us this perspective. WorldDenver is an organization that promotes and facilitates international exchange. We bring about 600 international visitors to Denver every year. And obviously those programs right now are postponed or suspended. And during this hiatus, it's really important and it's really great to see that there's still such a hunger and a craving for that international connection. I think the one thing that brings us all together is that we want to see and we want to hear from people around the world. And that's something that we at WorldDenver and at the Chamber want to continue to do, not just today, but throughout, as long as this social distancing lasts, and then we'll be excited to get the world all back together again afterwards.
Thanks, John. And then a few quick words about the GACC. So we're a similarly minded organization in terms of wanting to connect people, but of course we have a very niche focus when it comes to trade between Germany and Colorado. We put on a lot of events as well throughout the course of the year. A lot of those are being moved to webinars like this one. But we also are known in Denver for hosting the Denver Christkindl Market, which is a Christmas market held downtown. We'll be celebrating our 20th year this year. So we hope to see you out there. And yeah, we're very excited to be hosting the series with WorldDenver. So I'd like to go ahead and jump right into it since we have limited time. Very quick introduction of our panelists. We have Alessandra Gialdini, please forgive me for mispronunciations, who is in Milan, Italy. We have Justin Ostergard in Shanghai, China, Max Rüber in Düsseldorf, Germany, and then Emily Shah, who's based in Vienna, Austria. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll go into speaker mode so that when I'm going to address some questions to our panelists. We're going to go from different topics, including current culture, the government and what's going on in your respective countries, what businesses are doing, and then hopefully gaining some personal insights as well, personal experiences that you're all experiencing. So actually, I know Max is a little bit more strapped for time, so if we can start with Max. Could you tell us about the current policies that are instituted in your country regarding COVID-19?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm in Düsseldorf, Germany, as you said, and since Sunday, so the March 22nd, I believe, we do have a number of rules in place that Chancellor Merkel addressed in a speech. And so we're not allowed to go outside with people that are not from our household anymore. We can have one person that's not from our household, but other than that, all like social gatherings with more people are prohibited. All restaurants and yeah, mostly all stores are closed because you would obviously get too close to each other. You need to keep a distance of 1.5 meters, so that's what, like 5 to 6 feet from each other. Better would be 2 meters, so like 8 feet, probably, just my calculation. But yeah, that's what the idea is, and they try to limit social contact as much as possible. to
Perhaps a silly question, but in Colorado, there's different posters up saying 6 feet is about the length of a pair of skis. When you go to the grocery store, it's about 2 shopping carts. Are there any like fun signs that are coming up in Germany?
not that I know of, at
Bummer.
least. But yeah, that would be a good idea, actually. Never thought about it.
Well, great. Thank you, Max. Alessandra, could you give us some insight into Italy?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Our restrictions are very close to the one from Max from Germany, but we have been in total lockdown since the 8th of March, and every week at least we added more restrictions. So right now in this week, all the not essential good factories have been closed. So all the factories open only the one for food, for pharmacy stuff and medical stuff. So right now we have to stay home. We can go out and go out for food shopping. So only supermarkets, pharmacy and kiosk. We are not allowed to go out for jogging or walking, and no small gathering as well as Germany, but not even I can catch up with a friend, even though if I'm going to a supermarket, for example. And yes, we go in a line out of the supermarkets, and we have to keep the 1 meter distance every time. But then there are many policy. The police are always out in the street to check where are you going, and you can go to your office or to the hospital, but you have to have a certification that says I'm going to the office because I'm doing this job and I need to be in there, or I'm going to the hospital for this reason. So
And that certificate comes from your local government, like this?
Yes, they're not local, like the from the state, from the main government.
Okay.
So everybody has to have this certification if you go out other than shopping food.
Gotcha. Emily, how about in Austria?
So here in Austria, it sounds pretty similar. We also have a 1 meter rule that is being enforced, and they said in the first few days they had more than 500 €100 fines that were given out. However, I don't know of any government supplied documentation that you have to provide. It is suggested that you do bring your paperwork because they are checking to see whether or not people are part of your household or not. And so you're not allowed to meet even with one person not from your household here. The last time I saw my friends was on March 8th. And so basically since the 16th or so, things have been shut down. Grocery stores, pharmacies, of course, are open. But one of the things more pertinent to me and my community has to do with international travel. So around like the 18th, so like last week or so, many of my friends were pulled back to their nations of origin. So despite the travel bans that are happening more generally, all students and people with short-term contracts were told very explicitly, unless they have a plan to stay here indefinitely, that they should return to their country of residence. So that was really a huge difficulty for people to pack up within 48 hours. I had at least one colleague whose foreign ministry actually paid for her plane ticket home.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my next question, is who is funding all of that very immediate international travel? That sounds very expensive.
I'm not sure. I think it might depend on a case-by-case basis. And I know this is happening across the world because I had a friend who came home from California back home to India as well. And I believe he was self-funded. My friends from Russia, they were funded by the Russian government. But for other people, there is a lot more forgiveness than is typically present about extending your stay here. So you can extend for up to 90 days if your short-term visa is expiring. But there's very, very limited travel in and out of the country unless you have like a visa D, unless you're like married to someone or you have a working reason to be here. And even then you have a 14-day quarantine.
Maybe I can add to that quickly, because some of my friends went to Morocco for vacation, and actually Germany paid for their flights home. And I think most European states pay for their people's flights home from wherever they are. And for example, I know that some French people were on the plane that came from Morocco to Germany. So all European countries are at least kind of like trying to collaborate on getting their people home.
Well, and I was personally just on a call with someone from Lufthansa who was telling me about some options to get Germans to get back to Germany from the United States. And there's just so much more, there's a lot more limited opportunities to do so. There's a lot less opportunity for flights. I think the majority for Lufthansa are coming out of Chicago, Montreal, and I believe Newark. So it's interesting to see how people are navigating that to get home. Justin, I know that you have been traveling yourself, and this has actually been probably a little bit more part of your life than most of ours for a little bit longer of a time. I was wondering if you could tell us about your story so far.
Sure, yeah. Well, as far as China goes, we've kind of gone through a whole slew of different policies. Back in January was complete lockdown, highway systems locked down. No one was leaving their homes. It kind of helped that it was Chinese New Year, so people naturally wanted to be at home anyways. But then that, of course, got extended much longer than the national holiday. I actually left China January 23rd when Wuhan got locked down and was in Italy on vacation. And then my flight back to China was canceled. So then thankfully I was on a work trip, so the company covered my costs. But then I ended up flying to the US self-funded. They covered my hotel while I was extended stay in Italy. Then I flew back to the US to wait it out a bit. But we had 150 travelers, because I work in tourism, that were in Europe needing to get them back to China. So we covered their costs. China was not covering their return costs. And yeah, so then I was then in the US for 2 months and returned once the situation started getting fairly bad in the US. And coronavirus actually closed our business. So I came back to close up the business and close up my apartment here. And now the protocols are completely different. It's all focused on anyone flying into China. So life in general is back to normal throughout most of China. Restaurants, gyms, bars are all open. You have to have a QR code to get in. So I don't know if you can see this, but I have a red QR code because I'm currently in quarantine. So that'll turn green once I'm out of quarantine. And every establishment scans. Yeah. Every establishment scans your QR code when you go, including your office, everywhere. And China has an advantage here because everyone has WeChat. Literally every person in the entire country has this app. So they can push out initiatives like this fairly quickly. But the focus now is, of course, people flying back in because we're worried about a second outbreak. And so the screenings were extremely tough for me. I spent 24 hours from the time I landed. It was 24 hours until I got to my apartment through various travel screenings. What's my travel history? I did a health screening at the airport, a call with my landlord from the airport with the police, where they had to approve me staying in my apartment. Then testing. So we did medical testing, waited overnight in a hotel for the results. And then the next morning, they took us individually to our apartments where a local government committee met me to do an evaluation of my apartment space, whether I have a private bathroom, how many exits do I have, will I be in contact with other people, who do I live with, do I have pets, that sort of thing. And then once they evaluated it, they had me sign an agreement stating my dates that I would stay in quarantine. And then they now visit me twice per day to take temperature checks. And then I'm able to order delivery, which delivery in China is very, very convenient. It's inexpensive and you can order basically anything that you want. And I get my delivery sent to the local government committee and then they deliver it to me. And then they take my trash out every morning as well. So convenience and the infrastructure they have is truly unmatched, I think, in most places. I don't know that it'd be even possible in the US, for instance. But it's very effective. And now as of 45 minutes ago, they banned all foreigners from coming into China. So that's brand new. no one will be entering China.
And I think it might be worth noting, for the purpose of this call, since this is a recording, that we are currently at March 26, 2020. In Colorado, we are in a place where yesterday they provided us with the order, a stay-at-home order. We're obviously all across the board in very different places where Italy, you can't go outside even to jog. Justin, it sounds like you are in the most quarantine situation, and you have an app for that. Whereas in Colorado, people are still going outside and hanging out at parks. It's at the point now in Colorado where people are starting to be approached by law enforcement, telling them to break it up, to go home, but we're not quite as advanced down the line. And I'm sure there may be implications for that, but I don't, yeah. So actually, speaking of the government, this is to the full panel, do you think your government had an overreaction or an underreaction in terms of timing or what have you?
Okay, I can
Max?
go.
Oh, sure,
I
yeah.
know, Max, yeah.
No, you go ahead. Ladies first.
Okay. So I won't say over or under reaction. I'm pretty supportive of what the government has decided for Italy, because I mean, except that we already have seen this in China, still when everything got here, we couldn't understand really what was the dimension of the crisis. So I think that the government started with some restrictions and then increases every week. And so also the people could understand more that they had to stay home, because if you just lock down, people get in panic like they did at the beginning of our crisis situation before the lockdown. People assaulted the supermarkets without even thinking that if they went to the supermarkets all together, I mean, they could get infected more easily because they were really all close to each other. So, so in order to don't panic everybody, I think that the government has done the right thing. So restriction always increase by weeks. So right now, I mean, probably we should be more restricted, because we still can go out for supermarkets, and probably it's better not to go out. But we don't have a really good delivery service, so all the delivery here is overwhelmed with orders. So we have to go out for shopping food and stuff. But I think I support the decision from my government, actually.
Max?
Okay, so I'm kind of divided. I find that really hard to respond to that question, because on one hand, I think they overreacted, because I also read a comment from some researcher who said, well, if we hadn't known about the virus, we would have just said it's a bad flu season. And on the other hand, I read comments that it could get so much worse. So I'm like, I really don't know. And then, you know, it's something that you can only judge after it's over, or in like a couple of weeks at least, because right now we don't really know all that much about the virus, or how dangerous it actually is, how we can contain it. And I think we can only do what the researchers tell us, and then check later how it helped, and also check the damage that it did to the economy, because that's going to be one of the major impacts for our lives.
Emily?
So can I just add something to Max? Like we understood that we were in a crisis, because all the hospitals are almost full of people infected, and this is a bad virus. I mean, this is dangerous, because if you get in a bad way, you have to go in this intensive hospital sections. And I mean, there are not many beds for everybody. So when the hospitals are almost full, then you understand that you have to stay home. And this overreaction from the government is good, because if you keep on spreading the virus, then hospital will be too much overwhelmed, and then that will be the real crisis. And this is what we are experiencing here in Italy, where especially in Milano and the region Lombardy, where the hospitals are really almost overwhelmed of people, infected people.
And if I could actually chime in a couple points on that. When I was in Florence at the end of January, I had minor symptoms. So I went into the hospital and they didn't know where to put me. So they put me in like a back storage room. And that was in late January. So even now, it must be way worse. And in terms of the government reaction, it's actually a very difficult question for me to answer as well, because there's such controversy over numbers reporting in China. And at the beginning, it's very difficult to weed through news sources that are credible, and what information I'm getting, from each side of what the truth is. But I do believe that the reaction for the first 2 weeks of January was an underreaction. I believe that there was underreporting. That's my personal belief. I don't have anything to support that, factually, other than past experience. But I think the government reaction as of January 20th was an accurate reaction, or an appropriate reaction, based on their experience with SARS, because the SARS reaction was very, very similar here in China. I think globally it was very different, but I think the complete lockdown was fairly standard here, to be honest. No one responded with pushback. It was an established protocol, and that's very much so Chinese culture, is to respond to the government and trust that it's better for society. And I think that overall it has been, and I think the numbers are showing that.
Thanks, Justin. Emily, you mentioned folks needing to be sent home to their countries. Do you think that was a necessary step, or if you could comment on other portions of the government?
Yeah, so I very much had the option to go back to the United States, but to be honest, I have a much greater trust in the Austrian government and their response to this crisis than I do in the US government. And partly because the city of Vienna, as well as the country of Austria in general, I think that, hindsight is 2020. And while I do think they could have started responding sooner, I do think that the measures that they implemented in the pace that they implemented that were correct, and they were appropriate based on the information that they had at the time. I have a very unusual viewpoint on it, because I happened to hear about it when there were only 12 cases in Wuhan, just because I happened to have a meeting with the medical director on something completely unrelated. And he just brought up the fact that, like, oh, there's this weird thing and they think that it's from this market, but we don't know if there's human to human transmission yet. And then I also have family members who went home for the holidays and then just stayed there for months. And it was very interesting to me, because I was on a phone call with my sister-in-law, who still has family back in China. And she said they're pretty far from Wuhan. I looked on a map, and to me, they seemed quite close. But I said, are you worried about your family? And she said, no, not at all. My village is so small that everyone's been home for 2 months. No one's coming in or out of that village, because unless you're born there, there's no reason to go. However, working in an international context, I was just like, the woman in the office next to me just came back from Ghana. The guy across the hall from me came back from Ukraine yesterday. 3 doors down, and I was just like, and everybody here like kisses on the cheek. And so I was just like, oh no. And then I realized, especially after the news came out about the cruise ship that was parked outside of Japan came out, I realized that I'm in a very similar situation, because I live in a building with 700 people. So what I was very concerned about from a very early stage was I would probably be okay. But me as a vector, and my colleagues as vectors, and my housemates as vectors, we have a truly international reach. So when we get pulled home, all of these people from Russia are being sent home, and they requested testing at the airport and were unable to receive it. So when you're talking about vector transmission, like that's something that I find deeply concerning. And while I understand that Europe, especially for people that don't come from the US or from other places in Europe, the cost of living here is so high that financially it was unsustainable to keep someone from India here without an income. So I think it's very difficult to balance the economic impact, but Chancellor Kurz released a stimulus package that is the largest that's ever been released in peacetime, which was, I think, 38 billion? I don't know, it's 10% of the economy here in a stimulus package. So there is a ton, the government will pay between 80 and 90% of your salary. There are tax deferments and loan deferments and all of these sorts of things that are not present in the US. So here in general, I find that people are much less panicked. They also seem, from what I know, they seem to have enough tests. They seem to have enough masks. Whether or not that's accurate is unsure because I'm not privy to a lot of the German media, the German language media, but based on what I can tell, it seems pretty appropriate.
It's actually, so in terms of PPE, it's interesting that you mentioned that. Obviously, the United States is not fully prepared in terms of having that personal protective equipment to the point where in Chicago, they're requesting new supplies from TV shows that, like Chicago Fire, that have personal or that have PPE as basically as a prop because that's one of the only places you can get it now. So I do want to be cognizant of everyone's time. We're about at the half-hour mark. I'm wondering if anyone needs to jump off or jump off soon, or are we still good to have a few more questions?
I'm still good.
Okay, great. Well, so one of you, or maybe a few of you mentioned the concept of social distancing, where we're keeping away from people at least 6 feet or a few meters. I'm wondering if you could talk to us about how, as that progressed in your country, how people were responding to that. Were they immediately on board? Are they on board now? Yeah, if you could just, if any of you would be willing to talk to us about social distancing.
Yeah, I can go ahead. So for Germany being known the very touchy and open and friendly people that we are, social distancing wasn't all that much of an issue, I think. We usually don't have our grandparents living in the same house or apartment as us. So there are a lot less contact people. We're kind of like, we keep our distance anyways in normal life. So I feel like it wasn't all that much of a deal. Of course, there are still people out there who cannot get that idea into their heads, but I mean, yeah, they're everywhere.
So before the lockdown, so before we can't go out, in the first 2 weeks where there were few restrictions, so I could go to Lodi. It's my hometown, and it's in the red zone where the first infected person was founded. I was really afraid to go in my hometown and get infected and then go back to Milano and go back to my colleagues and say, yes, this weekend I was at my parents' place, and then get everybody scared, because at the beginning we were like, yes, why are you going there? You don't need to see your parents, and you can get infected and you will infect us and everything. So, and at the same point, my parents were like, yeah, you can come. We are not infected. We are healthy and everything is fine. So I was really in the between, and I decided to go, but I was really scared, and I didn't hug anybody. I didn't kiss anybody. I stayed there like 5 hours just to do some few stuff that I had to do and then go back. So yeah, also here where we are used to kiss on the cheek, everybody, and then, I mean, we are really, you know, before the lockdown, we were really like, yes, okay, hi, nice to see you again. And we were really already social distancing, but only the people who were aware. Then also after the lockdown, there were many people who were still going out for jogging together and then meet at the park with the dogs. So it's people who are aware of what is going on, they practice social distancing, and others are still like, yeah, okay, I can still do my normal life.
So based on what I've seen, and I think, so my area of Vienna has more cases than other areas of Vienna, but I also have one of the largest districts. So basically like all of central Vienna would fit inside my district. So that's a little bit misleading. But I do see that people are being pretty respectful of other people, like when they're passing each other, even on the sidewalks. People tend to be pretty spaced out in parks. I usually only see groups of like 1 or 2 or 3 people together, and often they seem like they'd be a household. I'm like, that's a family. They look family-like. So based on what I'm seeing out in the streets, people are being fairly good, but they're not being good inside the stores. So like no one's spacing out at the checkout. People are still standing quite close, reaching past one another. So I don't know how cognizant the general public is. At least in the international community, I feel that people are taking it fairly seriously, but I think these are also people that are used to having social distance from the people they care about the most. Many of these people have lived abroad most of their lives. And so I think keeping in touch and keeping close emotional distance in the context of social distance is something that many of us are well practiced at. So it's possible that it's a little bit easier for some of us than others because we've already been doing this for a while.
For us, there hasn't really been a progression of social distancing to lockdown. It was pretty quick to lockdown. So I think the social distancing piece wasn't as much of a factor here in China. It's affecting my family back in the US more so than I'm seeing here.
Well, so in a lot of you mentioned family. I think this particular generation on the panel is probably parenting the parents maybe for the first time when it comes to this. When it comes to your parents or your grandparents or maybe older relatives or friends even, have you had to take the parent role, and what has that been like?
Heavily. My older brother, he's in Mexico City going to the clubs last weekend, and I had to give him a call and be like, come on, like, you know, and you're not in a country that has healthcare infrastructure to like handle you if something happens. And then he's talking about going back to my parents' place, and I had to tell my mom, like, I really don't think that that's a good idea. Like, I think you should have him do quarantine in his apartment for 2 weeks before you let him come back to your place. And even my mom watches my niece and nephew 2 days a week, but my sister-in-law is still at work at a hospital. And I'm like, Mom, like, I don't think you can watch these kids. Like, you need to talk to my sister-in-law and ask her to stay home from work. So a lot of moving pieces. And when I was first back in the US, they didn't take it seriously at all. And even 2 weeks ago, my mom was like, oh, it's so funny. It's like, Mom, this is not a joke. So.
The way I take care of them is just like, because there are many fake news also spreading on WhatsApp and Facebook and stuff. And my grandma and my mother, they always send me, oh, look at this, look at that. And I'm like, okay, don't trust everything you receive from WhatsApp, because you just get scared and you don't know if it's true or not. Just, focus on one media that you want and one website news that you want to follow. Just look at that, and don't look at all the WhatsApp that you receive, all the fake news that you receive. So this is my way of protecting them.
Yeah, same for me. My grandmother's actually in hospital right now because she tripped and fell in her backyard and broke both her feet. And we cannot even visit her because all the hospitals are locked down. Unfortunately, my uncle decided to go and visit her anyways when she was transported from one hospital to another. Don't ask me why. I told him that was not the smartest thing ever. but yeah, I mean, sometimes you have to parent the parents.
Yeah, for me, it's been kind of interesting because my mom has a medical background. She used to be a cardiac nurse, but nonetheless, she's still susceptible to like online fake memes. And they're like, if you drink water, I'm like, no, mom, if you drink water, no, like, no. And so, and this is something that I've noticed. I've had multiple people with medical backgrounds send me all sorts of things that I'm like, this is not realistic. But at the same time, my parents are sanitizing their house with hydrochloric acid. So it's like a real mixed bag in my family. Like on one hand, they're like really overreacting, and on one hand, they're like buying into anything. So I think they're at the stage where if it might possibly do anything, no matter if it's like I put a chicken in my purse and I said a spell, like they are so susceptible to like anything at this point. And so I'm trying to make sure that I keep them focused on doing like the most important things that they need to be doing. And not going into the really like outlandish stuff. So
can you guys hear me? I think Emily may have froze on my end. Not sure.
Same for me.
Okay. Well, maybe while she gets reconnected, John, if you're able to hear me, do you want to ask a question?
Yeah, just in the way that we are, focused on solidarity, and I'm really interested to know kind of the ways in which each of us in our corners of the globe are spending our time. So what are your creative outlets? What are you watching? How are you staying connected with family and friends? And, we've got a lot of time on our hands. What are you all doing with it?
I've been trying to use my time to show some of the light at the end of the tunnel, and I'm excited to get out of quarantine so I can show that a bit more, because I think we're just getting lambasted with, in some ways, reality, but in some ways, just complete negativity on media, and people at home need some sort of hope. So that's been my focus, is trying to do things, do creative things, like, hey, here is the light at the end of the tunnel. Restaurants are open here. Like, if you listen to protocol, we will get to this quicker. But then also playing Nintendo Switch, watching Netflix, working on the job outlook after all of this. So my resume, cover letters, that sort of stuff to stay productive. But that's the fun stuff.
I will say personally, Just Dance on the Switch has been incredible for getting some exercise in too. It's been wonderful. And I'm going to have like some great moves after this whole thing is over with.
I'm going to have to go grab that game.
Max, what are you doing in Germany?
So I work as a consultant here, and well, most of our projects have been canceled, but I have been so fortunate or unfortunate, however you want to call it, to still have 2 big projects going. So I'm kind of working quite a lot, and aside from that, I mean, we can still go out for walks, and as I guess everybody else, Netflix, Amazon Prime have been some of my best friends.
So because I work in a media company, actually we had some trouble, I would say, for work, because many companies, they just cancel all of the advertising campaign because it was not worth it anymore to go online or on TV. So I have less work to do, and so I have a really much more free time. And except for Netflix, anybody mentioned Disney Plus? We just got it here in Italy, so I'm really into it. I'm working out. I never work out in my apartment before, so I'm like, okay, I need to stay healthy, and work out on my own. And then I'm tidying up my apartment, so I just doing my wardrobe over and over again to find the perfect fit of stuff, and that's all.
Excellent. And Emily, welcome back. We were just talking about ways that we're passing the time. What are you doing now that you are in more of a lockdown situation? How are you utilizing your time?
Yeah. So in some ways, I'm actually doing a speech on this on Toastmasters soon, but I have the incredible benefit of having spent a few years being very chronically ill. So in that time, I never thought that I would look back and be like, man, I'm so glad that I was so sick. But man, I am so glad that I was so sick. And I'm hoping that other people can take this time and be like, you know what, like, I'm good at this. Like, I've got this back in 2020. Because I learned that there is a personal freedom that you have. And I also remind myself of how much more difficult life can be and how people's spirits can really triumph in that. So I'm reading through A Man's Search for Meaning right now. And Viktor Frankl talks about his time in Auschwitz and how he was so deeply affected by the people who would give words of comfort and their last slice of bread, and how that was proof that no matter your circumstance, you can always choose your response, and that like the meaning of life is really to find out what life is asking of you. So I found myself really busy. This weekend, I have a hackathon that I'm joining, and you don't need to have any tech skills. You don't need to be able to code. You just need to want to help. So I'm joining a hackathon this weekend. Today, I just started consulting for a research platform. It was already a startup. They already had the platform built out for research insights, but now they've gone 100% to support COVID efforts. So I will be doing some UI, so user interface and user experience research for them, and going out and finding like, what do researchers need? How can we help them sift through the like thousands of papers and news articles and find the thing that's most pertinent to their research? So that's another thing that I'm working on. I have been trying to find out ways to keep employing small businesses that are deeply affected. So in my past life, I was a massage therapist, and I'm not sure if that industry will exist anymore. So I don't know how long it will take for the health and wellness industry to recover. It's a place where touch is of the essence, literally. So I recently paid my old trainer, and I'm taking remote dance lessons, and more or less I've set myself up for like really fun homeschool. So I've got like dance class, and then I've got art class, and I'm studying a little bit of philosophy. I'm writing poems with a friend of mine. And so I've found that I found a freedom and an exploration here, because I normally might feel weird reaching out to someone who I haven't talked to since high school, but this is the perfect excuse to say hello, to check in with people, and to check in with people who might be lonely, someone who moved recently, but also the people who always seem like they have it together. Because I think often those people are people that need support, and they're not always offered support. So, you know, I've been trying to make myself as useful as I can, and also clean my desk.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Actually, so last week, on a personal note, I was able to connect with all of my best buddies from college who are split up all across the country. And for the first time in like 10 years, we were all in the same room together, as it were. So it's actually creating a lot of very interesting opportunities that people are willing to participate in, because we have this sort of, I don't know, time, I guess. A few of you touched on businesses in this time frame, and I would love to touch on that if we can, just for a moment. I'd love to know what's going on in your countries in terms of what businesses are still open, and are people, maybe perhaps in China, are some people back to work at this point? If you guys could give me a little bit of insight there, that'd be great.
Sure, yeah. Most offices are all open here in China. So my office actually opened late February, February 22nd. And I believe is the date, somewhere around there. But most places are open. Most companies also require a survey of your travel history, and then they have to send that to the government. So the oversight is there. So those businesses are open. And as far as like supporting local, I have a lot of close ties to the drag community in Denver. So trying to support drag queens who can't get any work at all, and so they're doing their shows virtually. So that's been sort of fun. Instead of art class, you know, Emily, instead of my homeschool is watching drag shows on FaceTime. So
Could you send links?
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll send you their handles so you can follow them. Then they post everything there.
Max, what are businesses looking like in Germany right now?
Most companies are still open. Restaurants are, yeah, like you're not allowed to go to a restaurant, but you can pick up food. And yeah, so most places are open. Most people try to work from home if they can. So if you have a laptop, you're probably not in the office anymore. For example, my girlfriend's office, they closed the entire office, so no one's allowed to be there anymore. Before that, they tried to rotate, like they had a blue group and a red group, and tried to rotate weekly, but they got rid of that idea real quick. And so, as I don't remember who it was said that, but there have been a lot of help from the government. And yeah, I think it was Emily, right, in Austria. So very similar package in Germany. A lot of money for people who are self-employed, have like less than 10 people working for them. My company, for example, has what we call short labor. So for example, for me, it's 50%. So I only get 50% of my wage from the company that I work for. And from the remaining 50% of my salary, I get 60% from the government. So we do have ideas how to like save money that the government steps in. But yeah, work's been still going. All the companies are open as much as possible, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah, no, we are all the companies are closed. I mean, closed, and there are someone who can still work from home, but I have many friends in different. I mean, I'm in the media company, so actually we are still fine, even though we have less clients, but we are still fine. But other factories like and companies in fashion or automotive or travel, they are home and they are on forced holidays, and then if it's needed, we'll have some packages from the States, as Max said before. So, but yeah, basically we are all the companies are closed now, except for the food one, the one that produces food or pharmacy or.
Yeah, here, so far as I know, I cook a lot and I've been like pretty hardcore in quarantine, so I haven't really been walking around much. But the restaurants and bars are closed, and I think most of the people I happen to know work in some sort of essential companies that are just fine. But I do think it's really challenging for other people whose sectors might not recover. So I'd be interested to hear from anybody else who is in one of those sectors that might have a great difficulty. So like in hospitality, in food, in health and wellness, about how you plan on doing business continuity, because I'm friends with a lot of small business owners back in the US, and they are really, really frightened because not only do they have their house double mortgaged, they employ 10 people. So I'd really like to hear strategies about how different countries are tackling this, but also how individual businesses are moving forward to sort of create a sense of as much stability and hopefulness as they can among their workforce.
And I don't have too much experience in that personally. Well, I do and I don't. So the German American Chamber, one of the largest events that we host each year is the Denver Christkindl Market. And that's far enough away that we're pretty confident that we'll be able to do it and have a successful year. But there are many other organizations that are very focused on events. And I have friends who are event managers who are no longer employed. And I imagine it's going to be difficult because there's going to be companies that are hiring these roles, but there's going to be a lot of qualified candidates who are looking for a new one. So I'm sure it's going to be pretty competitive coming back into it. I will say that I've also personally seen bars that are similar to what Justin was saying with drag shows that are just hosting like DJs virtually and using it as fundraisers to help their employees who no longer have a place to go to work right now. I've also seen in Colorado just posters on the street advertising, yes, we're open for pickup, and that it's the only way that restaurants are able to stay in business right now is by offering some sort of service where people can get food, whereas others are shortening their hours. So there's been a lot of different responses so far. I do want to be very cognizant of everyone's time. We're about to come up on an hour. I'd love to end on one more question, if that's all right, if you all have time. I was wondering if you could tell us about what personally has been perhaps the most challenging part of this experience for you, and if you have any words of encouragement that you could share with the other panelists or with the folks who are viewing this following this recording. We're all from very different places, and we're all in different stages of this, but it's very clear that we're really all in this together. So I'd love to hear a little bit about that from you as well. Max, how about
no
you?
one wants
Okay.
It's mine's pretty easy. So my contract ended at the end of February. And so being in the middle of a job search right now is really, really challenging because I don't know what will be funded and what won't be funded. I don't know whether or not the jobs whether the job posts I'm responding to are actually live or not. Also, I have been thinking about my career trajectory a lot because this could be a pivotal moment when we need a fundamentally different approach to work. And I'm very focused on the future of work and what automation means. I helped run an automation challenge at my own organization. So as things move online, like how do we not leave people behind is my big question. And so how can I get the skills that I need to get so that I can help make sure that people are as employable as they can be? So what I've been trying to do is for myself and others is as I find postings that are relevant, I post them so that I could help lift my friends up because I feel like a rising tide lifts all boats. And also I learned that having a native English background is extremely valuable here. So I've just been like correcting people's resumes, helping with statements of purpose, doing that sort of thing, sort of like on barter. So people have been teaching me about quantum physics or teaching me about flower arranging or paying me a few bucks here and there. And so I think there's always hope if we help one another. And so I don't know, hopefully someone down the line is just like, hey, Emily, I've got a job for you as well. So I figure what goes around comes around. So we just need to help each other out as best we can.
I'd love to mirror exactly what Emily was saying. I think it's the fear, or it's the unknown that's been so difficult for me with having my flights canceled, what airlines will be flying, what travel ban's gonna pop up tomorrow. I have a dog here, like what airlines will accept pet travel. So a lot of just like, I don't know the next steps, and also the job hunt as well. And I think the hardest thing for me has been when people ask me, what's your plan? So what, I have no idea. and it's hard to consistently answer, I don't know what my plan is for my life, because then that just is constant reflection to myself. So something that I think is more productive is either just checking in, like how are you feeling, or providing something productive, like Emily was suggesting, like do something helpful for one another. And like you said, like what goes around comes around. Rising tide, what was the phrase? I really liked it. Raises all boats.
Oh, yeah, a rising tide lifts all boats.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I think that's like probably going to be the most helpful thing through all of this is just being a rising tide for everybody.
Actually, what I'm experiencing actually is more because I'm okay with my job and I'm pretty much, I mean, secure that everything is going to be fine on that side. I actually feeling powerless because so here in Italy we didn't reach the peak of the infected people. So every night there are the figures about how many more infected have been on that day, how many deaths, how many people recover and stuff. So so every night I go to bed and I feel powerless because I don't know what I can do because I'm not a doctor and I don't work in a hospital and so on. So just if you will experience like this, I mean, it's normal. Everybody here, all of my friends and colleagues, they feel the same. But then yes, what I decided to do is so the Milano, the city decided to build a voluntary group of people for this emergency, and I signed up. So now I'm in their database, and as soon as they found someone in my neighborhood who needs help for going to the supermarket, or just have a call because they're alone in their home, and they just want to talk to someone, I know that they will contact me, and I can be helpful for someone else, and at the same time feel a bit less powerless, because I mean, the situation, although I'm okay and everybody's okay, well, from the people that I know, it's really bad out there in the hospital and where people are struggling. So there is this feeling of being helpful to someone else as well.
Yeah, I can completely relate to Alessandra. In the beginning, I was like, okay, there's nothing I can do because I don't know anything about viruses. And then I started like just in the neighborhood. I told people like, oh, like we have a couple of older people living in the neighborhood. So I went to them and I was like, hey, if you need help, if you need anything, just let me know. I can run to the supermarket for you, drop it off at your house. So that's not a lot. I do realize that, but it's a little bit. And if it helps, that's good. I just really hope that all of this is kind of over soonish. They are working on vaccines, and they said maybe autumn. So I'm hoping for something like this. Yeah, I really like the "a rising tide lifts all boats" sentence, and I think that could be a good headline for the call today.
Yeah, I was going to say that's totally going to be stolen and hashtagged and everything that we can do with it.
Yeah.
If anybody needs stuff to do, I'm super plugged in just in general. So like whatever your background is, whatever you're good at, like I know someone who could use your help for sure. So feel free to reach out to me.
Thanks.
Great. Well, thank you, everybody. I know we had some technical glitches this morning, or evening, or midnight for some of you. So I'm really glad that you were all able to stick around and have this conversation. I found it personally really uplifting and optimistic, and it's really it's been really great to talk with all of you and to learn about your experiences. And I'm sure the members at WorldDenver and the GACC will feel the same. So thank you so much. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for putting this together.
Yep. Yeah, it was a really good time. And like in the beginning, I thought when I went home on like short labor, I thought, well, this is pretty bad. But now I hear other people who don't have a job anymore and who really don't know. And I'm kind of like, it's not all that bad for me personally, at least. And then hearing people like ways to help other people and reach out, that's really uplifting.
Yeah.
Great. And I just want to say thank you on behalf of WorldDenver. This was an experiment and our first time, and you all had such good insight. I don't know if the quarantine QR code is something that I'm going to remember as very innovative or just very frightening, but I'm certainly going to remember it. Thank you again. And, it's organizations, WorldDenver and the Chamber, this is the kind of thing that we're going to just continue to try to do. But I really appreciate you all giving us your time this morning and being our kind of first test run for this. So thank you.
Pleasure.
Yep, thank you so much. And for folks who are joining, one final plug for both organizations. WorldDenver is a membership organization. You can reach them at worlddenver.org, and very similar with the German American Chamber of Commerce, GACC-CO.org. So we look forward to hearing from you. And thank you, panel, so much. We really appreciate it. Have a great night and be well.
Same to you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.